Next on Currents News, new heartbreak after a fire tore through a Queens home. A young man has died from the blaze that already claimed the lives of his mother and sister. We'll have the latest. The heroes of 9/11 win a big victory. The Victim Compensation Fund gets new money from Congress. Now suffering first responders and their families will finally be helped. Triumph over terrorism in the Philippines. A Catholic cathedral reopened 6 months after it was bombed. Plus, Pope Francis could make history with a trip to a dangerous place, Iraq, where deadly Christian persecution is raging. The news starts right now. Sunday's blaze in Richmond Hill, Queens has claimed yet another life. 19-year-old Gilbert Perez has taken his last breath, meeting his 7-year-old sister Guadalupe and 51-year-old mother Sylvia in heaven. Good evening, I'm Tamara Lane. After more than 24 hours in intensive care, Gilbert Perez has succumbed to his injuries suffered by the fire, likely burns and smoke inhalation. At this hour, a memorial is growing outside the church just blocks from the fire. Currents News' Tim Harfman is in Richmond Hill.
Tamara, a damaged air conditioner cord caused Sunday's inferno. You can see behind me the memorial on the steps of Holy Child Jesus Catholic Academy. Members of this parish say they're at a loss for words as they now remember the lives of 3 parishioners. 19-year-old Gilbert Diaz, seen here on the left, has died from injuries he sustained this weekend from a raging house fire in Richmond Hill, Queens. He had just graduated from Richmond Hill High School and was planning on going to college. Gilbert frequently attended Mass with his family at Holy Child Jesus Church just blocks from his home.
The parish community is in deep mourning. 3 members of our faith, 3 who have been in contact closely with this parish.
Bishop Octavio Cisneros, the pastor of Holy Child Jesus Church, says the community is already holding a memorial for the family tonight. Gilbert's sister, 7-year-old Guadalupe Perez, and her mother, 51-year-old Sylvia Umana, died Sunday in the blaze. His younger brother Gabriel is still alive. Guadalupe had just completed 1st grade at the Holy Child Jesus Catholic Academy.
Our Lord has said, when one part of the body hurts, the whole body hurts, and we're all hurting.
To cope, the Academy is holding a meeting Tuesday night for parents to understand how to talk to their children about loss. Parishioners say they feel for the only survivor, Gabriel, now without any immediate family members.
So overwhelming, so honestly I have no words. It's just so sad that he's gonna have no mother, no siblings.
It's going to be tough on him, and he's going to need all our prayers and all our support. You know, I just pray that he has the grace of God to get him through this.
The principal of Holy Child Jesus Catholic Academy, Patricia Winters, set up a donation page for people to help the family. Go online to gofundme.com and search Guadalupe Perez / Sylvia Umana Memorial Fund. And I'll have a full report of the Memorial Mass on tomorrow's program. In Richmond Hill, Queens, Tim Harfman, Currents News. Tamara, back to you.
The funerals for Sylvia and her children, Guadalupe and Gilbert, will be held Monday, July 29th at 10:15 in the morning at Holy Child Jesus Church in Richmond Hill, Queens. The 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund is getting the boost it needs to carry on. This afternoon, the Senate okayed new money to look after the needs of suffering first responders and their families. Camila Bernal reports the latest.
The bill is passed
97-2. An overwhelming majority of senators Tuesday voting to compensate 9/11 first responders permanently.
These were our bravest soldiers. They rushed to the towers.
The bill funds the 9/11 Victim Compensation Fund through 2090, helping individuals who were injured during the 2001 attacks and its aftermath, rescuing people and removing debris under hazardous conditions. Some were with comedian and activist Jon Stewart watching from the Senate gallery.
Solving this problem is urgent because more and more people become sick.
But the bill's future didn't always look certain. Last week, Senator Rand Paul delayed the bill, urging Congress to offset the costs by cutting government spending elsewhere.
Every bit of new spending, it doesn't matter whether it's a good cause, bad cause, or in-between cause. We need to not keep adding to the debt.
Despite the senator's concerns, the passage of the bill means the cost will be what is deemed necessary.
We can never repay all that the 9/11 community has done for our country, but we can stop penalizing them. And today is that day.
The House passed a bill earlier this month, and President Donald Trump is expected to sign it. Camila Bernal, Currents News.
Now to the Philippines, where a Catholic cathedral that was bombed by Islamic militants is finally reopening. The celebration comes 6 months after a deadly terrorist attack claimed the lives of 20 people and injured 102 others. The Cathedral of Our Lady of Mount Carmel needed to be rebuilt, and it was, just in time for Our Lady's feast day with the help of the charity organization Aid to the Church in Need. Hundreds of thousands of people have been filling the streets of San Juan for the past week, demanding the resignation of Puerto Rico's Governor Ricardo Rossello. One of the largest crowds in the island's history gathered last night, vowing not to be moved.
They're going to fire tear gas imminently. Here it comes, here it comes, here it comes.
In the early hours of the morning, police say they tried to get the crowds to leave, giving several warnings and sounding an alarm before firing tear gas. As tensions in the capital city escalate, the Puerto Rican Bishops Conference has announced it will hold a 24-hour prayer encounter this weekend. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz is stepping down as the chair of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee for Religious Liberty. The news comes as the Louisville, Kentucky prelate undergoes treatment for bladder cancer. Bishop Robert McManus of Worcester, Massachusetts, has been named acting chair of the Religious Freedom Committee until the USCCB holds its General Assembly meeting in November. Meanwhile, Pope Francis has named Baltimore Auxiliary Bishop Mark Brennan, seen here, to lead the Diocese of Wheeling-Charleston in West Virginia. The appointment comes 10 months after Bishop Michael Bransfield retired amid accusations of sexual harassment and financial misconduct, and less than a week after the Vatican banned him from public ministry. Bishop Bransfield had held his position for 13 years. Britain has chosen a new prime minister. Boris Johnson will assume the position tomorrow after Theresa May steps down. President Donald Trump has already congratulated the winner and says he will be great. With both nations facing policy issues and escalating tensions with Iran, Omar Jimenez breaks down just what the British election means for the United States.
Across the pond, the United Kingdom has a new prime minister.
We're going to get Brexit done on October the 31st.
Boris Johnson is set to replace current PM Theresa May. He played a decisive role in making Brexit happen in 2016 by breaking ranks and backing the movement last minute. And his reputation is one that's popular with another world leader.
Boris Johnson, good man. He's tough and he's smart. They're saying Britain Trump.
Many comparisons have been made between the two, in some cases regarding their tendencies at times to operate on their own agendas. But there are major policy differences between the two on many fronts. And at the end of the day, both of them will have to work with each other on significant issues, including trade and what has become an increasingly tense relationship with Iran.
What he can do to persuade President Trump to look again at the conditions in which he might sign a deal with Iran is, in my view, very important.
It's a working relationship that will also come during a deadlock junction for the UK, leaving the European Union with an agreed-upon deal.
Deliver, unite, and defeat was not the perfect acronym for an election campaign, since unfortunately it spells dud. But they forgot the final E, my friends, E for energize. And I say to all the doubters, dude, we are going to energize the country.
Omar Jimenez, Currents News.
Okay. A big deal to avert a big crisis will allow the government to spend more money. Congressional leaders from both parties and the White House reaching a sweeping agreement. The deal raises spending by more than $300 billion and suspends the debt ceiling until after the 2020 elections. President Trump is calling it a real compromise. Other Republicans aren't so happy with the added spending.
I believe that we have to be focused on fiscal responsibility. It's one thing for Republicans to talk about it, but we've got to live up with $22 trillion in debt and the deficits that have been out of control.
Congress still needs to approve the deal. Both House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell promised votes before lawmakers leave Friday for a 6-week recess. And another high-stakes drama is expected on Capitol Hill tomorrow. Former special counsel Robert Muller will appear before 2 committees of the House. He'll be questioned about Russian interference in the 2016 election and the possible obstruction of his investigation. The Justice Department is telling Muller to keep his answers confined to what's already in his public report. A story still developing at this hour. The mysterious sonic attack on U.S. government personnel in Havana appears to have literally changed people's brains. The Americans reported hearing intensely loud sounds coming from a specific direction in 2016. Now MRI scans are showing differences all over their brains. Doctors aren't reaching conclusions just yet, but insist the brains were injured. Cuba denies responsibility for any attacks targeting diplomats in Havana. There's a lot more news headed your way. The persecutions of Christians could bring Pope Francis to a dangerous place. Christopher White is here with the latest on a risky mission. Why neighbors formed a human chain in a standoff with ICE. Did Archbishop Sheen perform a miracle from heaven? I'll talk to a grateful mom who thinks he did, just in time to save her son. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. The mission that could make history. Pope Francis possibly traveling through the heart of the Middle East, Iraq. Experts are warning the persecution of Christians there could lead to the faith's extinction. The national correspondent for the Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, joins us now for more on this high-stakes papal journey. Christopher, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you.
We're hearing a lot of buzz right now about a possible trip to Iraq. What's driving this?
Well, when the Pope decides where he wants to go, he's very strategic about it. And what motivates this Pope is he likes to go to the peripheries, places that some of us think are out of reach. And particularly when it comes to Iraq, when he was traveling to Panama in January, my Crux colleague, Inez and Martin, said, I just spoke to a bishop in Iraq and he wants you to come there. And he said, I want to go. So I think this is very personal for the Pope, and that's what's motivating him.
Well, some observers believe that this could be the most important trip of the Francis papacy. Why?
Well, I think when you think about places in the world the Pope has been, you can check off a lot of boxes, but no Pope has ever been to Iraq. And so considering Iraq's sort of great ties to the Christian faith, it really is the cradle of Christianity. To have the Pope go there and sort of lift that up and remind Christians of that history would be a huge gesture. But it comes with all sorts of risk. I mean, the country has been, devastated in recent years, and Christians are continually getting driven out of the country. There are parts that are unsafe. Most recently, there were bombings last week in Erbil, which is a Christian stronghold. So it isn't as if this is a risk-free trip that he's considering.
Well, and you just said that Christians have faced brutal persecution. What challenges would he face if he goes there, and what would the mission be?
Well, I think in terms of the mission, it would be twofold. One, to encourage the Christian community that's on the ground there and say, your numbers have dropped dramatically. By some counts, there are fewer than 100,000 Christians left there, which is just staggering. But also to encourage interfaith dialogue, to say, Christians and Muslims can live and should live together in peace. This is something we've seen him do in previous trips, most recently in February in the United Arab Emirates. So I think this is something that the Pope wants to do. But there are challenges, as I mentioned, specifically when it comes to safety. And even the country's own bishops, some of them are raising concerns.
Well, all of this sounds terrific as well as historic, but what is the likelihood of this happening?
Well, the Pope makes up his mind on something. He's pretty determined. I mean, 2 particular trips come to mind. His very first papal trip when he became Pope was down to Lampedusa, a tiny island off the coast of Italy. And his advisor said, no, you can't make that, you can't make that. And the story goes that the Pope called up the airline himself and hired the charter and said, we're going there. And again, in 2015, when he wanted to go to the Central African Republic, public. He was cautioned no, 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 even by the United Nations, and he persisted and he went, and he even told his pilot, he said, if it's too dangerous to land, just strap a parachute on me, I'm going anyway. So I think, if the Pope is determined, he'll find a way to get there.
Well, we'll patiently await the announcement on which way this goes.
Absolutely.
National correspondent for The Tablet and Crux, Christopher White, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Tamara.
Religious publishers say President Donald Trump's proposed tariffs on Chinese imports could result in a Bible shortage. That's because millions of Bibles, 150 million or more, are printed there each year. Critics of the tariffs believe it would make the most read book in the world more expensive. They also worry it could hurt Christian evangelization efforts. An Immigration and Customs Enforcement agent tried to bring an undocumented man in Nashville, Tennessee into custody, but neighbors formed a human chain to allow the man and his son to return home. Currents News' Michelle Powers has more on the story.
These are a couple of ICE officers.
For 4 hours, a man and his son sat inside of this car as 2 Immigration and Customs Enforcement agents tried to get them to surrender. The father is reportedly in the country illegally, so the ICE agents were tasked with bringing him into custody. But when neighbors heard what was going on, they came to assist their neighbor.
We made sure they had water, they had food, we put gas back in the vehicle when they were getting low, just to make sure that they're okay.
These folks in Hermitage, Tennessee say they don't care how someone got here. It's how they act when they're here.
The family don't bother nobody. They work every day. They come home. The kids jump on their trampoline. It's just a community.
Stacey Farley helped create a human chain to help the family get from their car safely to their home. And she didn't think twice about supporting her neighbors.
I could see if these people were bad criminals, but they're not. They're just trying to provide for their kids.
The standoff brought Metro Police to the scene to keep the peace, council members, as well as lawyers to evaluate the situation.
There were 2 immigration officials sort of bullying a family inside their own vehicle, telling them that they had an administrative warrant, which isn't the same thing as a judicial warrant, and trying to harass them and fear them into coming out.
At the end of the day, the ICE agents left, and the family ended up leaving too, in search of a safer place. Michelle Powers, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News. Capturing decades of memories, a Catholic high school is opening their vaults to students before closing their doors for the last time. The miracle work of Archbishop Sheen. I speak with a mom who believes the holy man saved her son. And The Tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all the joyous sacraments. For more details and submit your photo, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. As a Brooklyn Catholic high school is preparing to close its doors for the final time, faculty is giving students a chance to reclaim their old memories. Bishop Carney High School is selling cherished yearbooks going all the way back to 1965 on their online store. The all-girls school in Bensonhurst is closing permanently on August 31st, citing a mountain of issues including declining enrollment. If you are a former student and would like to buy a yearbook, head to shop.bishopcarneyhs.org. Each yearbook costs $10. On September 15, 2010, Bonnie Angstrom went into labor following what she described as a beautifully easy pregnancy. But her sense of well-being was soon shaken when her son James was born not breathing and without a pulse for 61 terrifying minutes. She lived the mother's worst nightmare until she literally had a miracle that changed everything. Joining me now from Washington, Illinois is Bonnie Angstrom. Bonnie, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So can you tell us what happened that day?
Sure. So it was just a normal pregnancy. I went into labor just like normal. Everything was healthy and pointed that everything would be fine. But what we didn't know was that there was a knot in James's umbilical cord. And so while I was delivering my son, that knot tightened, and it tightened so much that it just completely cut off his oxygen supply. So that when James was born and they placed him in my arms, He was blue, he was not breathing, and his body was just completely lifeless.
For 61 minutes?
Yes, for 61 minutes. My husband did an emergency baptism. The midwife was doing CPR. 911 was called. And so there was about 20 minutes at home. There was about 20 minutes in transport in the ambulance. And then there was about another 20 minutes in the emergency room. And that whole time he had no pulse.
So what led you to seek the intercession of Bishop Sheen?
So my husband and I had been watching YouTube videos and old episodes of his show Life is Worth Living while I was pregnant with my son. And we were just really taken by him. And we knew his cause was open for canonization. And so we thought, this is it. This is the man who we're going to put our son under his patronage. And so from that moment, at some point in the second trimester, I just started asking for Fulton Sheen's prayers in the life of my son, and we knew he would be named James Fulton. So then, kind of in this crisis, when I was going into a state of shock, I didn't know what to do, I didn't know what to say. I really think it was just the Holy Spirit led me to call on Fulton Sheen, and all I did was say his name, Fulton Sheen, Fulton Sheen. And I really think that was just, my way of relying back on this habit and this friend who I had been relying on for months.
Well, and James is now 8. The doctors were not optimistic about his health prospects. How is he?
He is great. He is just a normal little 8-year-old boy. Sometimes he is just the most wonderful, thoughtful kid, and sometimes he's the biggest stinker. Anyone who's been around an 8-year-old boy will know exactly what I'm talking about, but totally normal, healthy kid.
And as you said, James's middle name is Fulton. Is he aware about the awesome circumstances surrounding his birth?
He is, yes. It's just part of our family's normal. It's a story that we celebrate in our home because we are so grateful for what God has done. And so, yeah, everyone's aware. And on some level, though, how do you wrap your mind around everything? But he knows.
Well, are you planning a trip to Rome?
Well, the beatification will happen in Peoria, Illinois, which is right near where we live. So we only have to make a 20-minute drive. But eventually, if it be God's will and Fulton Sheen is canonized, we would love to go to Rome for the canonization.
Well, on July 5th, Pope Francis formally approved James's recovery as a miracle attributed to the intercession of Archbishop Sheen. What are your thoughts about his cause for beatification and ultimately canonizing him?
I am just so grateful. Fulton Sheen his example has done so much for my life personally, for my relationship with Christ. His witness, his writings it's been so important to us as an entire family. And so to know that the church is progressing so that he can be held up for the entire world to really turn to read his books, to listen to his preaching. The ultimate goal is to know and love Jesus Christ better. And Fulton Sheen can definitely do that. I know he can. He has for us.
Well, Bonnie, thank you so much for joining us. An incredible story, and we can't wait to see what happens. That was Bonnie Angstrom from Washington, Illinois.
Thank you so much for having me.
That is Currents News. I'm Tamara Lane. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.